The air in my kitchen, thick with the scent of simmering herbs and roasted meat, was a symphony of my love. For weeks, I, Martha, had been pouring every ounce of my 65-year-old self into this day. It was not just any day, it was my daughter Sarah's surprise party. A grand, joyous occasion, planned with the utmost secrecy and care. Sarah, my only child, had been so busy with her work, her 2 children, and her bustling life with her husband, Mark, that she had grown distant. I understood, of course. The modern world demanded so much. But I yearned for a moment to show her how much she meant to me, a moment to bring her back to the nest, to the warmth of family. My house, this home of 45 years, was to be the stage for this reunion. The menu was a tapestry of our shared history. A rich, slow-cooked beef bourguignon, a recipe my own mother had taught me, was a testament to tradition. A delicate saffron risotto, which Sarah had always adored, was my nod to her sophisticated palate. The tiered chocolate cake, a project of 3 full days of baking and decorating, was a recreation of a cake I had made for her 12th birthday, an homage to a time when our lives were simpler and our connection was unbreakable. I had invited all of her closest friends, her colleagues, and our relatives. The house itself, usually so quiet, was alive with balloons of every shade of blue and gold, shimmering streamers, and a banner I had meticulously painted with the words, "Happy Surprise." The table was set with my finest china, the one I only used for Christmas and Thanksgiving, each plate gleaming under the soft, ambient light of the living room. As the final touches were placed and the clock hands crept towards the designated hour, a shiver of pure, unadulterated excitement ran through me. I imagined Sarah's face when she would walk through that door, her eyes wide with surprise, her smile lighting up the room. I envisioned her hugs, her laughter, the way she would tell me I was the best mother in the world. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I dialed her number. "Hello, Mom," she answered, her voice sounding a touch impatient, as it so often did these days. "My darling, are you on your way?" I asked, my voice bubbling with an enthusiasm I could not contain. "We are all waiting for you. The party is about to begin." There was a moment of silence on the other end, a silence that felt cold and foreign, a silence that did not fit with the festive air of my home. And then, her words came, slow and measured, a gentle cruelty that shattered the carefully constructed fantasy of my afternoon. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "What party?" she asked, her tone devoid of any emotion, of any surprise. "We are not going anywhere. We are staying home tonight. It is my husband's birthday." A cold dread began to creep into my veins. I looked around my vibrant, festive living room, the beautiful table, the glowing candles. The carefully crafted lie I had been telling myself for weeks was crumbling. "But Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "I have spent so much time on this. The party, the surprise. It is all for you." "Mom, I do not understand," she said, her voice now tinged with a hint of exasperation. "I have been planning your birthday party. I told you I wanted to do something special for you. It is your 65th birthday, after all." My heart sank. My surprise party for her was not a surprise at all, but rather, her surprise party for me. A surprise party I had not been invited to. The full weight of the situation crashed down upon me. The guests were not coming for her. They were not coming for me. No one was coming. Sarah had forgotten my birthday and had instead, in a last-minute attempt to make things right, decided to throw me a surprise party. A party where no one was present. The silence that followed was a physical presence in the room, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, hot and stinging. I quickly blinked them back. I could not let her see my pain. I could not let her know that she had broken my heart. "Oh, right," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle and hollow. "How silly of me. I am so sorry. I must have gotten my dates confused. I am just so excited about my own birthday, you know." Sarah's voice softened, but it was a cold, distant kind of softness, like a winter's sun. "Of course, Mom. I know you're excited. That is why I am trying to make this special for you. But you are just being so emotional lately." The words were a direct hit, a stab to my already wounded spirit. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I was not emotional, that I was heartbroken, that her thoughtlessness had crushed me. But I said nothing. I just stood there in the middle of a beautiful, vibrant room that now felt like a mausoleum for my hopes and my love. "Look, I have to go now," she said, her tone reverting back to its usual hurried pace. "I am so busy with work. Do not worry about a thing. We will make your birthday so special." And then, she was gone. The phone went dead. I slowly lowered it from my ear, the silence in the room returning, amplified by the hollowness in my chest. The carefully arranged decorations, the gleaming china, the tantalizing aroma of the food, all of it now felt like a cruel joke. I walked to the window and looked out into the street. Cars drove by, their headlights a blur of motion. Families were likely gathering for their own celebrations, their laughter echoing through the night. And here I was, standing alone in a home that was no longer a sanctuary, but a tomb of unfulfilled desires. My heart felt like a physical weight in my chest, heavy and aching. I did not know what to do. I did not know how to fix this. All I knew was that I was profoundly, utterly alone. The tears finally came, hot and furious, as I stared at my reflection in the dark windowpane, a woman I no longer recognized. The silence that followed that night was more deafening than any noise I have ever heard. My home, which had once been filled with so much life and so many memories, now felt like a museum of my foolishness. The birthday banner I had so meticulously painted remained hanging in the living room for days, a constant, mocking reminder of my failed attempt to connect with my daughter. The carefully crafted food, a labor of love that had consumed so much of my time and energy, sat in the refrigerator, untouched and uneaten. Every time I opened the door, a wave of sadness washed over me. The leftovers were a physical manifestation of my heartbreak, a monument to a love that was not reciprocated. Sarah called me a few days later, her voice still filled with that distant, hurried politeness. She did not mention the party. She did not apologize. She simply asked how I was, her voice a hollow echo of a daughter I once knew. "I am fine, darling," I said, my voice sounding older, more brittle than it had just a week ago. "That is good, Mom," she said. "We are so busy with the kids' school and with Mark's work. You know how it is." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I did not know how it was. I wanted to tell her that I had a life, too, that my feelings mattered. But the words died in my throat. What was the use? She would not have understood. She never did. The weeks that followed were filled with a profound sense of loneliness. My mornings were spent watering my garden, a quiet refuge where the plants, at least, seemed to appreciate my care. My afternoons were a blur of doing household chores, each task a monotonous repetition that offered a small distraction from the emptiness inside me. I was a ghost in my own home, a memory of a person I used to be. My husband, bless his soul, had passed away 3 years prior, and the loneliness I felt then was a gentle, familiar sadness. This new loneliness was a sharp, biting pain, a wound that refused to heal. One afternoon, a few weeks after the party that never was, Sarah and Mark came over unannounced. They sat on my living room couch, the same couch where I had sat, waiting for guests who never came. There was a peculiar sense of purpose in their movements, an unusual air of seriousness that made my stomach churn with a premonition of bad news. "Mom," Sarah began, her voice unusually firm. "Mark and I have been talking. We are worried about you." My heart, already a fragile thing, tightened in my chest. "Worried? What for?" "I am perfectly fine." Mark leaned forward, his hands clasped together, his expression one of a practiced concern. "Martha, let us be honest. This house is far too much for one person. It is a burden. All the maintenance, the repairs, it is not safe for you." The words burden and not safe echoed in my ears, two sharp blows to my dignity. This house was my sanctuary. It was where I had raised my daughter. It was where my husband and I had built a life. This house was not a burden. It was a home. "I am a capable woman," I said, my voice trembling with a nascent anger. "I can take care of myself. This is my home." Sarah reached out and placed a hand on my knee, a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt condescending. "We know that, Mom. But think about it. You could move into a lovely, quiet apartment. A place closer to us. We could visit you every day. You would not have to worry about a thing." Their words were a poison, laced with a false sweetness. They were not concerned about me. They were concerned about something else. I felt a growing sense of dread, a chilling realization that their intentions were far from noble. I looked at their faces, their expressions a carefully constructed mask of concern, and I saw through it. I saw the greed in their eyes, the calculated selfishness. They did not want to move me closer to them for my sake. They wanted me to sell the house. The house, a beautiful, sprawling home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, was a valuable piece of property. My husband and I had paid it off years ago. It was my only asset, my only security. And they wanted me to give it up. I felt a surge of indignation, a hot, furious wave of emotion that had been building inside me for weeks. This was not about my safety. This was about their greed. This was about them wanting my money. My mind began to race, piecing together all the little clues I had so foolishly ignored. The sudden interest in my well-being, the subtle questions about my finances, the condescending tones. The birthday party that never was. It was all a part of a larger, more sinister plan. They had thought me an old, senile woman, easily manipulated, easily fooled. They had underestimated me. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. "I am not selling my house," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "This is my home. It is where I belong. I do not need a new apartment. I do not need you to worry about me. I am perfectly fine on my own." Sarah and Mark exchanged a look, a silent, furious exchange that spoke volumes. Their masks of concern slipped, revealing a flash of irritation and resentment. They had not expected me to stand up to them. They had expected me to crumble, to submit to their will. "Mom, you are being difficult," Sarah said, her voice now sharp with frustration. "We are only trying to help you. Think about the future." "I am thinking about the future," I said, my voice now calm and cold, the calm before the storm. "And my future is here. In this house." They left soon after, their faces clouded with a barely concealed anger. I stood in the doorway, watching them get into their car and drive away. The house, once so quiet and empty, now felt alive with a new purpose. The sadness and loneliness were gone, replaced by a fierce, burning resolve. They had underestimated me. They had thought I was weak. But they did not know the strength of a woman who had just been pushed to the very edge. I closed the door, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. They had started this game, and I would finish it. The days that followed Sarah and Mark's visit were marked by a profound change in my demeanor. The quiet despair that had haunted my home for weeks was gone, replaced by a fierce, quiet resolve. They had played their hand, and now it was my turn. They thought they had seen all of me, the grieving widow, the lonely mother. But they had not seen the woman who had managed a household for 4 decades, who had juggled finances and responsibilities, who had survived. The grief had been real, the loneliness palpable, but they had mistaken my pain for weakness. They were so very wrong. My first act was one of quiet rebellion. I put on my old, comfortable walking shoes and headed to the library. I spent hours there, not in the fiction section as I usually would, but in the aisles dedicated to law and finance. I read about property rights, trusts, and the nuances of estate planning. The words, once so dry and incomprehensible, now held a new and powerful meaning. They were the tools of my liberation. I learned about legal loopholes and clever maneuvers that could be used to protect assets. I learned about the importance of secrecy and the power of a well-executed plan. I learned about a world they thought I was too old to understand. My mind, which they had dismissed as frail, felt sharper and more focused than it had in years. Next, I went to my bank. I had a small, private account, a secret from my late husband and everyone else, a fund I had been adding to for decades from the small, unseen earnings from my baking and selling handmade crafts. It was not a large fortune, but it was enough. Enough for a beginning. I withdrew the majority of it, a move that sent a ripple of alarm through the bank teller, who, bless her heart, asked me if I was certain. "I am certain," I said, my voice ringing with a new and powerful authority. "I am very certain." I then began to feign a new kind of persona for Sarah and Mark. I became the image of what they wanted me to be, the fragile, confused, and agreeable old woman. When they called to ask about my decision to sell the house, I would sigh and say, "I suppose you are right. This house is too much. You know what is best for me." Their voices, once tinged with impatience, were now filled with a smug satisfaction. They believed they had won. They saw my capitulation as a sign of my senility, not my cunning. They did not know that every agreement I made was a new nail in the coffin of their plans. They brought real estate agents to the house. I played my part to perfection. I would shuffle around the rooms, pointing out non-existent flaws, talking about the house as if it were a strange and foreign place. The agents, seeing my performance, would exchange condescending glances with Sarah and Mark, who would simply shake their heads with a look of feigned pity. I listened as they discussed my house, my memories, my life, as if it were a mere commodity. I heard them speak of renovations and market values, their words devoid of any sentimental meaning. I heard Mark's whispers to Sarah about the profit margins, about the new car they would buy with their share. I saw their greedy, expectant eyes as they walked through my home. It was a vile and sickening performance, and I was the unsuspecting star. One evening, after the last real estate agent had left, Sarah and Mark stayed behind. They were flushed with excitement, their faces animated with the anticipation of what was to come. They spoke freely, openly, believing that I was a passive, unhearing presence. "I cannot believe how easy this was," Mark said, a cruel smirk on his face. "We had to be patient, but we got what we wanted." "I know," Sarah said, her voice a low purr. I was so worried for a moment there when she said no. But I guess all those tears worked. She is so emotional. I sat there, listening to them, the words a fresh wave of cold steel through my heart. They were not worried about me. They had never been worried about me. Their concern was a carefully constructed lie. All of it had been a lie. The birthday party, the phone calls, the visits. Everything was a part of their master plan to get their hands on my money. The thought of it, the sheer cruelty and calculation of it all, was almost unbearable. My heart, so recently hardened by resolve, felt a deep, aching pain. This was not just a conflict over money. This was a complete and utter betrayal of love. They saw me as a burden, as an obstacle, as a source of profit. And I, in my naive hope, had thought I had a family that loved me. The depth of their deception was staggering. "So, tomorrow is the day," Sarah said, her voice filled with a giddy excitement. "The final signing. Then it will all be ours. We can finally get that new kitchen we have been wanting and maybe a trip to Europe. And Mom will be safe and sound in her little apartment," Mark added, a callous chuckle escaping his lips. "It is a win-win." I stared at them, my face a carefully blank canvas. They did not see the fire burning in my eyes. They did not see the rage that was building inside me. They only saw the frail, old woman who was about to give them what they wanted. But they did not know about my secret account. They did not know about the lawyer I had met with in a small, quiet office downtown. They did not know that their entire world was about to come crashing down around them. My heart ached, not for what I was about to lose, but for what they had lost a long, long time ago, their humanity. The time for sorrow was over. The time for justice had arrived. The morning of the signing dawned, a brilliant and beautiful day that felt completely at odds with the darkness in my soul. Sarah and Mark arrived, their faces radiating a smug confidence that was sickening to witness. They were dressed in their best clothes, their smiles wide and predatory. They saw me, sitting in my old armchair, wearing my threadbare sweater, and they saw a relic, a past they were about to sell and forget. They saw an inheritance that was theirs for the taking. I played my part, feigning a small tremor in my hand as I held my coffee cup, a subtle nod to the supposed fragility they believed I possessed. They were so absorbed in their victory that they did not notice the quiet determination in my eyes, the steel in my spine. We arrived at the lawyer's office, a modern, sterile room with a large glass table. Sarah and Mark sat opposite me, their faces lit up with greedy anticipation. The lawyer, a kind-faced man named Mr. Peterson, began to lay out the documents. I listened as he explained the transfer of ownership, the terms of the sale, the financial implications. Sarah and Mark nodded along, their eyes fixed on the numbers, their minds already spending the money. "Everything seems to be in order," Mr. Peterson said, looking at me. "All we need is your signature." Sarah pushed the pen towards me, her smile a little too wide, a little too triumphant. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The moment they would finally take what they believed was theirs. My hand, which I had so carefully made to appear shaky, was suddenly impossibly steady. "I am afraid there has been a slight misunderstanding," I said, my voice clear and calm, cutting through the silence of the room like a knife. Sarah's smile faltered. Mark's confident posture stiffened. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with a sudden, anxious edge. I took a deep breath. "This house," I said, looking directly at them, "is not for sale." The room fell silent. A heavy, palpable silence filled the air, the kind that precedes a storm. Their faces, a moment ago so full of triumph, now contorted into masks of shock and disbelief. But we agreed," Mark sputtered, his voice cracking with a mix of confusion and rage. "We just went over the papers." "The papers for this house, yes," I said, pulling out a different set of documents from my bag. "These are the papers for my other properties. The ones you did not know about." I laid them on the table. One was a deed to a beautiful, modern condominium in the heart of the city, a place with a view of the skyline. The other was a bill of sale for my 2 rental properties, small but lucrative apartments my husband and I had bought decades ago, a secret nest egg we had never touched. And then, I laid down the final document, a trust agreement. "The money from the sale of these properties," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word, "has been placed into a private trust. This trust is to be used for my care and my personal expenses for the rest of my life. The house you were so eager to sell, this house, is now a charitable trust in the name of your father. It is to be sold, and the proceeds are to go to a local animal shelter he so loved." Sarah's face went pale. Mark looked as if I had physically struck him. They had been so consumed by their own greed, so blinded by their belief in my weakness, that they had not noticed the other assets, the quiet investments, the life I had built outside of their narrow field of vision. They had assumed I had nothing but this house, and they were so very wrong. You cannot do this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I already have," I said, a small, sad smile on my face. "The trust is legally binding. The papers are signed. Your father's memory will be honored. And I will be living the rest of my life in a place of my choosing, with my own money, on my own terms." Their pleas and angry outbursts that followed were a chaotic and pathetic symphony of desperation. They had nothing. The inheritance they had so eagerly anticipated was gone. The house they had coveted, the money they had already spent in their minds, all of it was gone, given to animals who would appreciate it more than them. I sat there, listening to their pleas, their accusations, their pathetic attempts to gaslight me, to make me feel guilty. But I felt nothing. The pain was gone. It had been replaced by a serene, powerful sense of justice. I walked out of the office, leaving them to their misery. I did not look back. My sweet revenge was not just in taking what they wanted. It was in my newfound freedom. I moved into my new condominium, a space filled with light and life. I began to take painting classes, to volunteer at the local library, to travel. My days were no longer a lonely blur, but a vibrant tapestry of new experiences. I was finally living, truly living, for the first time in years. Sarah and Mark called me months later. Their voices, once so full of arrogance, were now filled with a desperate need. They had made poor financial decisions. They needed help. I listened to their story, to their pleas, to their assurances that they had changed. And then I simply hung up the phone. I did not need to scream. I did not need to yell. My silence was the most powerful statement of all. They had underestimated me. They had thought me a frail, old woman. But they did not know the strength of a woman who had been pushed to her limit. They did not know that sometimes, to gain your dignity, you must walk away, leaving those who hurt you to face the consequences of their own actions. I was not a victim. I was a survivor. And my life was just beginning.